Welcome to Engaging Leaders, a Leadership Maryland podcast brought to you by Beacon at Salisbury University and BFG Financial Advisors. Since 1992, Leadership Maryland has been connecting and empowering leaders through transformational experiences, dialogue, and education. Each month, we host candid conversations to promote positive outcomes in your organizations and communities. I'm your host, Eric Brotman, so excited to be joined again this month by my co-host and the CEO of Leadership Maryland, Renée Winsky. Renée, welcome.
Thank you, Eric. Good morning. We have a very special guest with us today, Alex Nunez, a member of my class of the Rockin' Group of '05. Alex is also a former board member, but he's currently the Senior Vice President for Strategy and Regulatory Affairs with BGE. Welcome, Alex.
Good morning, Renée. Good morning, Eric.
So if you would just give us a little bit about your background, and then I know that between BGE and Exelon and Constellation Energy before that, you've spent nearly 20 years in private energy and utility sector. I want you to share some of your thoughts on your leadership experience in a very large private sector company.
Sure. Well, I'm thrilled again to be with you. My background in quick form, I'm a Marylander by native. Grew up in Lower Montgomery County here, and then went away to law school and college, came back to Maryland, started working for the Maryland legislature, and went from there right into advocacy work for Constellation Energy and BGE. We were acquired by Exelon in 2012. That's my current employer, and I've been working in BGE, the utility, since then. I have overseen our government affairs work, economic development work, our large customer services business, our communications and marketing. And currently, I'm the Senior Vice President of our strategy and regulatory function. So I try to make sure that we are on a path to a sustainable future for ourselves, our customers, and our communities, and make sure that as we work through every major issue with our regulator, the Maryland Public Service Commission, we do so with innovation and integrity and our customers in mind. So you asked about what insights I might have having worked for a large company, and it's been a real eye-opener. Until you're there, you don't really know. I think I would encourage people who are entering that environment to start with building a network. Because it is so large, you want to make sure that you can demonstrate your abilities and seek the opportunities to lead, whether you have that title or not. And so building that network gives you entry points into different parts of the business, different opportunities for yourself, but also different groups of people to learn from as you develop your own leadership competencies and presence. I think staying connected to people who have helped you along the way is also helpful. Developing a mentor can be a useful tool too. You also have to stay connected with the external community. At least in the function I had, it was very important for me to have strong relationships both inside the company broadly and outside. Each of those relationships gives you more examples of leadership to grow from. I think the next thing is to model your behaviors after people you admire. See the people who are around you, above you in the organization, and what you see as good leadership, emulate. And if you can, ask for direct guidance from those individuals. I think it's also important to take an interest in others and to help others succeed. Leadership isn't about making yourself stand out. It's about finding ways to make the very best opportunities for others and to elicit the best selves that they have that they may not be able to facilitate fully until they've had some external people working with them. And then I think that the last thing is a lot of people think just working hard and getting things done, getting goals achieved is enough. And it's really not. I think you need to be able to understand, over time, develop competency to understand long-term objectives and goals and vision that are achieved through near-term action items. And you need to keep both lenses in front of you at all times. I think you also need to be able to express that vision to effectively lead and to connect the dots about why that's important, not just to you as the leader, not just to the company, not just to the customers and the community, but also the employee and their function. Make sure that your team and the members of your peer group understand how they fit into that vision. Ultimately, I think leaders have to care about their employees. That's what's going to make you an effective leader in a big organization. And they need to understand that their work through you and with you is important to the mission and creating the greater good.
Alex, I love that. I love how you differentiated internal versus external networking. Because, of course, all of us with Leadership Maryland understand external networking, but many of us, myself included, not in large companies, don't even think about an internal networking component. So you talked about caring about employees. 20 years ago, when you started, roughly 20 years ago, when you started in this industry, you were the new kid on the block walking into this enormous organization or this enormous industry. And I suspect you were learning how to network internally, hopefully from go. Maybe you had a mentor or somebody within the organization. Well, now you're senior leadership. As a senior executive, you may have employees not only looking up to you, but some of them are asking you to be a mentor or a coach or a guide. Some of them probably want your job, which hopefully doesn't create a threat. It hopefully creates an opportunity where you've got somebody developing. How do you take on your role as a senior leader to help develop those folks so that there are future leaders within the company and the organization?
It's a great question, Eric. I think it starts by realizing that everybody has gotten wherever they are with the support of others. And that anyone in a senior leadership position is privileged and really fortunate to be there. And that creates an opportunity. And I will say, I think it creates an obligation to actively help others grow, whether they're going to aspire for leadership or not. I think that's a real key part of what a good leader should be doing. And so when someone comes to you and says, how do I do this? How do I get better? I want this job. What's the best path? Say yes to that inquiry. Get to know that individual and get to make sure that they're really aligning their passions, their strengths with what they perceive to be their ambitions. And then once that alignment is good and that employee is secure, if the relationship turns into something more formal, then you build a long path along with that person, coaching and guiding the person as they go through their career. I found that to be a very helpful way to go. But it's also, Eric, I think it's a two-way street. I've gotten tremendous learnings and insight about myself, about my own leadership style, about how to coach others more effectively through these relationships, through the opportunity to counsel and coach. So I think it's something that we must do, but it's also something that's beneficial to the leader. And I guess I would say also that there are multiple paths to success, and a lot of folks they may not perceive that at first. And your experience as a senior leader, your failures, your successes have informed your own opportunities through being flexible and trying things out that maybe you didn't fully understand at first. So I think helping let people understand that there's not always one way to get to where you want to go, and that you need to be flexible is important. I think the last thing I would say is you have to be flexible in the way that you interact. I've had a lot of people very structured with independent development plans and agendas for every meeting, and other people who just want to talk. And sometimes the conversation is more about them personally and their families. And if you're a good leader and you care closely about the employees you're working with, you'll want to help them in any way they need. I hope that's helpful, Eric.
Very helpful. Very helpful. So you mentioned failure. You and I talked about this a little bit in our prep for today. Not exactly something that we put out there on our social media and our resumes. Share with us, if you would, perhaps a failure in your career, and then more importantly, what you learned from that and how you see failure as a component of leadership.
Thanks, Renee. Failure, that's a really strong word, and I think it is often bogged down with a lot of negative weight. But I also think it's really a component of innovation and growth. when you're in any pursuit, professional or otherwise, you must experiment based on hypotheses, and you're going to try to validate your assumptions. You're going to try to see if you're right. And sometimes you're not going to be. Either the method or the objective just doesn't work out the way you expect. And you have a choice at that point to either be fueled through innovation and trying something different based on what you've learned, or you can let failure stop you and dishearten you. And I'm reminded of the anecdote that Thomas Edison discovered thousands of ways not to make a light bulb before he was successful. And that's always stayed in front of me as a sort of a reminder that failure is really to be embraced when it occurs. A recent failure, I could turn to a piece of legislation we were seeking here in Maryland in 2019, which would have required our regulator to move toward alternative forms of setting utility rates. And it was a very strong push, and we had done everything right, had a large number of supporters. We were really excited about modernizing rate making in Maryland, and we had success up until the very end of the legislative session. And when the bill failed, it was very easy to be disheartened. But we found that failure opened a path that we hadn't anticipated, and that was through our regulator setting up their own proceeding to review alternative rate making. I'm happy to say that in the last several months, over a year now, we've been working with stakeholders and the commission, and now have before the commission our first alternative rate making proposal, which is going well. So it's a reminder that when failure occurs, you really need to assess the options, remain open to paths that you didn't necessarily choose. But if your vision remains clear and the objective remains the right one, there are multiple paths to it. And so that resiliency through flexibility and nimbleness was a lesson I learned through that failure.
Alex, I think it's good to embrace failures. I agree with you. I think a failure, the only real failure is when you get knocked down, not to get back up. And being resilient is important. You're also in an industry where failures are magnified, because no one thinks about energy or utility companies or any of those kinds of things when the lights are on. They all think about you when they're off, even if they're not off for very long. So I can appreciate why it's like an airline pilot. You don't get a pat on the back for all the planes that land safely, but you hear about the one that doesn't, right? So I want to shift gears a little bit, because BGE and Constellation and you yourself individually have been very involved in community and in philanthropy and in volunteering. I dare say BGE has been one of the really terrific corporate citizens in our area. Can you talk a little bit about not only why it's important to stay plugged in and to give back to the community, but the ways in which perhaps you or the company are really making a difference that you're proud of and excited to share?
Eric, yeah, thanks. I love talking about this, so you may have to edit the length of my response, but I think we're all products of, and we've all been supported by the communities around us. That's where I start on this topic. And I believe there's a compelling case that if we have the opportunity to give time or talent or treasure back to those communities, or communities that are around us, even if they didn't serve our precise progress, we should. I think the effects can be so powerful when you can amplify your abilities, your experiences, and your opportunity to be an agent of change by having multiple people working together for a common purpose. So in my mind, it exposes you to different styles, different solutions, different channels. But again, you keep your vision on what can I do to make the community around me or the communities around me better. And through that diverse and inclusive team environment that nonprofit work does, for instance, or community engagement does, it's like giving yourself a bit of a superpower to work through others and to work with others and to learn from them. I was raised in a very small, close family, and I had multiple communities around me that gave me many chances and some second chances. I learned and I had examples to follow. My parents named me Alexander, which is a name that derives from Greek, and it means defender of the people or helper of people. So personally, some of this comes from the minting of my own name. And I was also inspired by the motto of my high school, which was Good Counsel High School, then in Wheaton, which I can't remember it precisely, but it's effectively that the loving good person, even alone, can make a difference. And I think that's always moved me. And I think it's also moved me to help BGE become so involved in the community. And I think we similarly, as an enterprise, realize we're a part of the fabric of Baltimore, of Maryland. We've benefited and grown as the economies of Maryland have developed since 1816. And we have the opportunity and the obligation to bring about improvements in our communities every day. And today, more than ever, I think we realize that obligation and that chance to advance social equity. And that's very much what we're about. We support more than 140 nonprofits through leadership presence on nonprofit boards. We, last year alone, and approximately annually for the last several years, have donated millions, last year $5 million. We are going to be doing that and more in the coming years to the nonprofits that surround us in Baltimore and Central Maryland. But it's also about partnerships. It's about thinking broadly and including others in your planning so that we know that when we put our money, our machine to work, when we put our talent to work, that we're achieving goals not just that we had in our field of vision, but that also support the progress that our community is looking to achieve.
That's a great response. And you got to love the fact that BGE in some way enables so many of their leaders to share their experiences with others in the community. I want to go a little bit further on that. You serve on the board of directors of the Baltimore chapter of the Association of Latino Professionals of America, and you also serve as the governor's appointee to the Commission on Hispanic Affairs. Could you shed a little light on how being Hispanic has shaped you and your style of leadership?
Of course. My father was born in Ecuador, Quito in Ecuador. My mother was born in the United States. So I grew up halfway, a first generation American. And it was an interesting upbringing. My parents' social circle and our family's social circle was mostly Latin American. But in the home, we tended to speak English. My father was very much about assimilation, which we were encouraged to do, but we never let go of. And in fact, we really reveled in the heritage of Latin Americans, but especially of Ecuadorians in the community around the District of Columbia and Lower Montgomery County, where I grew up. And so the food, the music, the emphasis on family and community comes from that. It has shaped me personally, shaped many of my preferences. But what's interesting is my last name was pronounced Nunez until I was 18, because at the time that was the way my father had been referred to when he was in the U.S. Army and then at work, and that's how we referred to ourselves. And I was in my freshman year of college at the University of Notre Dame, and my professor was doing roll call, and he called out my name. Somehow I must have responded Nunez, and he said, "Your name is Núñez." And it really hit me like a brick that there was something that I had been missing. And I called my father that evening and I said, from now on, my name is Núñez. And now our whole family uses that pronunciation and really doesn't anglicize our background. So I think when I think about the opportunities that the focus on family, the focus on community gave me, it helps me when I think about the value of diversity in our community today, the value of inclusion in the workplace, in decision making, and the need to help others, who want to come to this country and make their dreams come true and be a positive part of the story of the United States. And so that heritage now is a very core part of who I am. It's a very core part of how I try to bring people together in common purpose. And hopefully it will be a part of the mark that I'm able to achieve in my life.
That's great perspective. It's interesting to be a freshman in college and be and have your name pointed out to you. I can't imagine what that must have felt like. But I'm glad you embraced it. I think it's terrific. You have more punctuation in your name than most Americans. So there's that.
That's true. Eric, just to respond, I was truly embarrassed.
Sure.
But it was the kind of shock. It's like cold water on your face. It just woke you up, and it ended up really deepening my personal engagement in the Latin American community, my own history and heritage, and it's been a wonderful ride, and I hope it's something that helps me add more value to the lives of people I work with and live around.
That's great. It's a story you should be sharing for sure. I'm glad you shared it with us and with our listeners. I want to shift a little bit, if we can, to current affairs. 2020 has been a unique year in a lot of ways. I think some of them will turn out to be positive, but there's certainly been some challenges this year for lots of folks. And one of them is impacting your industry dramatically, in that there are a lot of families that are dealing with unemployment issues, health issues, financial issues, and having trouble making ends meet in terms of even just keeping their lights on. And I know there's been legislation, and there's been lots of different ways to sort of help ease that burden. But, as we go on 3-4 months into this and beyond, what is the impact likely to be on BGE, on customers, and not just BGE, but nationwide and maybe even worldwide, if you have that kind of perspective to share. But what is the impact of this economic tsunami, for lack of a more graceful term, that's hitting so many of the folks in the middle and sort of lower middle class who are really struggling right now?
It's a really powerful question, Eric. I think from a personal perspective, first, as a human being, I'm obviously very saddened by the reality we're in, and more broadly, the issues before our country in many ways have elicited outrage in me, because the circumstance is revealing structural inequities that our communities, not just locally, nationally, perhaps internationally, have known existed, but now they're being realized, they're being highlighted. It's profiled in great relief, and that has created outrage that in 2020 we have such structural inequities, such limited paths to equitable platforms for success for our fellow Americans, our fellow Marylanders, our fellow Baltimoreans. I think we're better than this. And I think that's where I go for strength. I go to what can we do to confront what's in front of us and to try to right what we see is wrong. That's where I get my strength as a person. I believe, I hope you don't mind me saying this also, that I believe that God loves each of us and that we must love one another. And that also powers me to think about ourselves as one family and how to take this opportunity that is very difficult for all of us, but more difficult for some, as one to help bring a more equitable future about for all of us. At BGE, we've done a really fabulous job, I will say, making sure that we are a reliable, safe, and affordable company, providing gas and electric services that, under those three metrics, we are among the very best in the country. And all the sister utilities that are within Exelon, we strive for those same objectives. But we also know that we serve 1.3 million electric customers and more than 600,000 gas customers, with thousands of miles of infrastructure that must be reinvested in, must be maintained, must be innovated in, which comes at a cost. And those investments, they need to be recovered, and they get recovered in rates. And we know that the utility bill is a monthly burden on every family and every business. we also know that the service we provide is vital to every home, every family, and every business. So making sure that we can do things as efficiently as possible is motivated by the desire to build that very good company that everybody has come to really value and expects us to do in the future. But to spend and to invest and to operate as efficiently as we can, leveraging all the technologies that can bring costs down and produce still better results than we even have today. And always keep a mind on the fact that not everyone is similarly situated economically. So if we can help educate our customers about how they can better use energy more efficiently, reduce their bills through changes in behavior or small actions they can make in their homes and businesses, that's a win for us. And if we can deliver savings while delivering a stronger, better, even more reliable, even safer system for our customers, that's what we're going to be doing.
That's fantastic. Renee, do you have any final questions? I can't believe we're at almost the end of our episode. Do you have a last question or comment?
I don't, but you have the final word, so take us home.
Well, thanks. All right. Well, then Alex, I'm going to put you on the spot, and this is going to be especially hard because you've shared so much wisdom with us already today. What I'd like to know is, what would your one tip be on how to grow leadership acumen, whether this is someone early in their careers or even pre-career while they're in school, or whether it's a senior leader looking to get better? How can you grow your leadership acumen? And we're looking for something that's both timely and timeless. So not to make this too difficult a question, but that you're on the hot seat. I
am. Thank you, Eric. Thanks for putting me there. It's such an important question.
My pleasure. There are no layups here.
I welcome the opportunity because there are, in fact, so many tips, and just trying to identify what the top one is a challenge. But the one I'm going to offer is to get engaged in nonprofit organizations and leadership. This is why. Any of us at our workplace, in our schools, we have the environment that we're in. We're pulling from that. We're looking at the examples around us of good work, of good thinking, of innovative thinking, of teamwork, of leadership. And that's good. But when you get onto a nonprofit board, you're suddenly a member of a very diverse team with a handful to dozens of people who come from different walks of life, who have very different experiences of you, that work in different industries, different sectors of the economy. And you're united in a common purpose to serve the mission of that nonprofit, but you're going to be doing that with a ton of energy coming from that diverse team. You get to learn about leadership styles that are not in your immediate community. And the more that you do that, the more quickly you can acquire those habits, those outlooks, those fundamental energies that others have that may not have been present in your primary occupation, whether it's school or work. So I think it helps you ultimately through that really recognize powers that you can cultivate, and that helps you execute the responsibilities that you either undertake in that nonprofit or more broadly, as we've talked, you may feel for your community and certainly for your primary occupation, the business that you work in.
Alex, you nailed the hot seat. I'm not surprised. Getting engaged with nonprofits and doing the volunteer work and being in the leadership of those groups does matter. It's kind of the opportunity to do well by doing good. And that's definitely a mantra that we can all wrap our heads around. So I want to thank you for joining us. Alex, it's been a pleasure.
Eric, thank you for your leadership. Renee, thank you for your leadership. I admire and respect each of you, and it's been a tremendous pleasure to be with you and your listeners today.
And for all of our listeners out there, thank you for listening to Engaging Leaders, a Leadership Maryland podcast brought to you by Beacon at Salisbury University and BFG Financial Advisors. This is your host, Eric Brotman, along with co-host Renée Winsky, reminding you to stay engaged. Be sure to tune in for new content every month.
You've been listening to Engaging Leaders, a Leadership Maryland podcast. Leadership Maryland is the foremost statewide organization where critical conversations occur in an environment of trust and civility to facilitate actionable change. For more information, visit us at www.engagingleaderspodcast.com. Please subscribe and leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform.